System TES, Talmud Eser Sefirot, Part 1, Tzimtzum Restriction, and Kav Line, Inner Reflection. So first we'll go over some few concepts and then we'll go straight into the inner reflection. So the first concept that we've done many times, we're just going to go over it briefly. The rules to understand Talmud Eser Sefirot. That the first rule, when we're reading it, is to go from unnecessaries when we're thinking it's talking about reality, to make it necessary when we understand that it's talking about our perception. To go from impossible when we think it's talking about the past, that is, we think that it's talking about states that we went through and not states that we're going to go through. We make it possible by understanding it's our future, things that we're going to go through, not things that we went through. We didn't go through the breaking of the vessels, we're going to go through breaking of the vessels after the parsa. And then finally, secrets is when we think that it's talking about others, and we disclose it to ourselves when we understand that it's talking about ourselves. So when we think that all different things in the Torah or the Zohar or in Talmud Sefirot, it's talking about the creature or about a donkey or some other person, it's always talking about yourself going through different states of perception in the future. And here's a quick recap on the phases. So the idea is when a person is born into the world, he goes through 4 phases before he passes the barrier. We've got Enoshut, which is humanity, the first phase, and he goes through 4 sub-phases in that. He goes from unformed humanity, which is 1.1, which is about food, the desires of food, sex, and family, and adds a new layer on top, which is 1.2, which is chaos humanity, which is desires for money, honor, and knowledge, in addition to the desires for food, sex, and family. Then when he gets his passive point in the heart, which is 1.3, he enters the darkness of humanity, which is dealing with religion and mysticism on top of the money, honor, and knowledge, and food, sex, and family. And then he reaches 1.4, which is spiritual humanity, when he finds the solution for his problems, which is Kabbalah. Then he reaches phase 2, which is called the Cheva Uchanit, the spiritual society. And he goes through 4 phases in that. There's 2.1, which is the unformed society, which is the society preparation when we come to the society and we're getting acquaintance with it. Then we've got 2.2, which is chaos society, which is when we get stuck in this mutual guarantee phase, where we think that we can bestow with the quality of reception, which of course is impossible. Then we've got 2.3 darkness societies, when we start to feel our active point in the heart, and we start to feel the limitations that society is not going to be the end all, and we need subsequent deeper layers inside the society to actually get us past the barrier. Then we've got 2.4, which is spirit societies, when we find a place like system concepts to clean concepts. And then when we've cleaned the basic concepts in some degree or another, then we reach the kfutza, which is the group phase. And when we go through 4 phases in that, and of course they're all added on the previous phases we've gone through. In 3.1, we go through the unformed group, which is when we have the correct goal, which is to become the creator, and we have focus on that, and when stopping dealing with unnecessary venues. And we've got 3.2, which is the chaos group, when the concepts become emotional for us. We've got 3.3, which is darkness in the group, is when we find out our pain point. We reach 3.4, the spirit group, when we've felt our pain point, now we have anticipation to reach our next phase, which is the individual phase, called Yechidei Sgula, individual. And we go through 4 phases, sub-phases before we cross the barrier, which is 4.1, unformed individual, which is called doubts. When we have doubts about the path, and those doubts aren't just intellectual, they're emotional as well. We have 4.2, which is chaos individual, where we have to take responsibility over the will to receive in the entire reality. Then we've got 4.3, which is darkness individual, where we have to take responsibility for the will to bestow, which is the creator within us, which is why it's called vulnerable, because you feel that you can't do actions of bestow anymore. You need to actually have the quality of bestow in order to do actions of bestowal. And then finally, we've got 4.4, which is the spirit individual phase. We feel at the end of that 4.4.4, you feel excitement and elevation. And then the phase after that is when you reach that emptiness, when you pass the barrier. Any questions on this?
I have a question, Zakai. We see 16 blocks here. Is it? I'm thinking that, you know, our particular perspective or souls, that it could be like take 5 minutes or whatever time, and we're seeing these things light up because our stage, so we might be in 4.1 at one point and then 2.3, and this kind of modulation of lights going on. Is that, like you're looking at an annunciator panel or something?
You can only go through this in the order specified. So you can't suddenly just wake up and be in 3.3. You have to go through all the phases beforehand. So if you're at 2.2, you have to go through that stage to reach 2.4, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. Someone in 1.4 who's just done a Kabbalah cannot suddenly reach 4.4.4 and pass the barrier. They have to go through all these subsequent phases.
Well, let's say they're already gone to, everybody here's at least in 2. I think I'm in 2 somewhere. And 2.4, trying to stay, So from that, I guess I was just seeing, I go from doubts. I mean, obviously there are doubts. Well, I'll leave it at that. I just saw some.
The doubts that you would feel at 2.3, which is the darkness society where you feel the society limitations, are going to be totally different from the doubts you feel at 4.1. The doubts that you're going to feel at 2.3 are not going to be, you're not going to have that depth of maturity within you for your doubts to be very deep either. So the doubts that you'll have at 2.3 are going to be very shallow, and the doubts you're going to have at 4.1 are going to be very deep. The 4.1 is called Milchemet Amalek, which is the war of Amalek, and the Amalek in Gematria is Safek, which is doubts. So the idea is that is a huge battle between, you've got the hands of Moses, which represents faith, and you've got the war of Amalek, which represents the doubts. And you win that battle by having more faith than reason. But you won't have that war in any stage beforehand. Sorry.
What phase is the war of Gog and Magog?
I don't know. I don't think it's here. Any questions before we continue? All right, let's continue. Introduction. So this is the introduction of, we're going over the inner reflection of Bala Sulam, and the idea is that Bala Sulam in the 16 parts of Talmud Sefirot always broke it between 2 parts. He had the chapters, which we went so far over chapter 1 and 2, where he has the Ari, and then beneath it he has his commentary. And in the inner reflection, he has now the ability to be dynamic. He can just basically write whatever he wants. He'll go over certain concepts that were normally referred to in the previous chapters of that part and give them a more freestyle interpretation and talk about the different concepts without having to be directly aligned to what the Ari wrote. So it's time to shine, you could say. Language of the branches. First, you must know that when dealing with spiritual matters that have no concern with time, space, and motion, and moreover, when dealing with godliness, we do not have the words by which to express and contemplate. Our entire vocabulary is taken from sensations of imaginary senses. Thus, how can they assist us where sense and imagination do not reign? For example, if you take the subtle words, namely orot, lights, it nonetheless resembles and borrows from the light of the sun, or an emotional light of satisfaction. Thus, how can they be used to express godly matters? They would certainly fail to provide the reader with anything true. It is even truer in a place where these words should disclose the negotiations in the wisdom in print, as is done in any research of wisdom. If we fail with even a single inadequate word, the reader will be instantly disoriented and will not find his hands and legs in this entire matter. For that reason, the sages of the Kabbalah have chosen a special language, which we can call the language of the branches. There is not an essence or a conduct in this world that does not begin in its shorish root in the upper world. Moreover, the beginning of every being in this world starts from the upper world and then hangs down to this world. I think this is quite explanatory. We'll finish the part, and then if there's any questions, we can go over it. Strict language usage. Thus the sages have found an adequate language without trouble, by which they could convey their attainments to each other by word of mouth and in writing from generation to generation. They have taken the names of the branches in this world, where each name is self-explanatory, as though pointing to its upper shorish root in the system of the upper worlds. That should appease your mind regarding the perplexing expressions we often find in books of Kabbalah, and some that are even foreign to the human spirit. It is because once they have chosen this language to express themselves, namely the language of the branches, they could no longer leave a branch unused because of its inferior degree. They could not avoid using it to express the desired concept, when our world suggests no other branch to be taken in its place. Just as two hairs do not feed off the same foramen, so we do not have two branches that relate to the same shorish root. It is also impossible to exterminate the object in the wisdom that is related to that inferior expression. Such a loss would inflict impairment and confusion in the entire realm of the wisdom. It says there is not another wisdom in the world where matters are so intermingled through cause and consequence. In the wisdom of Kabbalah, matters are connected and tied from tops to bottom like a single long chain.
I have a quick question before you get started again.
Yes.
It relates to the statement of we do not have two branches that relate to the same shoresh or root. And so immediately I thought, well, if there's only one creator, if there's only one source, and everything is derived from that, how can a branch not be attached to that root?
The branches are attached to that root, but the idea is that if you want to refer to discernments or distinguish two different things, then we have to use the branch that is needed. What this is referring to is the idea that in Kabbalah we see things like mating, striking, various words that the first thing comes in our mind are some kind of sex orientation and things like that. So the idea is that you could be, well, why didn't they use a different word? Why didn't they use the word connection instead of the word mating? And the idea is what they're saying is that each word has a different connotation and they want to use the language accordingly, and they can't just suddenly substitute one word with another just because people don't like hearing those words, that it's foreign to them to use these words like mating on a knowledge perspective.
So it's not in conflict with the idea that there's one shoresh, one root, but expresses itself in different branches. Am I understanding that right now?
Right, but the idea is that when it's talking here about root, it's talking about roots in the upper world. It's not talking about the creator, like the ultimate root. It's talking about the roots in, for example, the world of Atzilut that cascaded down to the world of Sia. So each root in Olam Atzilut has a branch in Olam Asiya. So they're saying they can't use a different word there, but they're not talking about the one root. They're not talking about the essence. They're talking about the roots in the world of Atzilut that cascade down to the world of Asiya.
Okay, let me try again. So the root is not the creator. The root is the essence of the creator that filters down through the different worlds till it finally gets to our world.
Right, but the idea is that when it's talking here about the upper shoresh or root, it's talking about the way the roots are, let's say, in the world of Atzilut, and they're using the words that we understand in, let's say, the Olam Asiya, in reality, but they're actually referring to the upper root. So, for example, when they say Lavan, which in the story is considered a wicked person, in Olam Atzilut, it's considered the wisdom, the light of wisdom, and it's a very powerful root. So the idea is they couldn't use a different word just because people, think of it as wicked. They couldn't use a different word to explain a more subtle, pure concept. So many times you'll find that the concepts that in the Torah, for example, Pharaoh, Laban, all different things like that, which we consider them as wicked people, in the upper roots, they're actually considered very pure things. So even if they're coarse at the bottom, we still have to use them because of their purity in their root. And we want to make a difference. We want to have to expose a certain detail in the world of Atzilut, but we use the same words. It's what we said that it says in the introduction to Talmud Sefirot that two people could be reading the same paragraph, the same words, and have two different explanations, because one is in attainment in this world, and the other is attainment in Atzilut, and therefore he will read it as totally different. He'll understand it totally different on a more pure, positive sense than someone in this world, which would read it on a more coarse, negative sense.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. This is the last slide. Required interpretation. Thus, there's no freedom of will here to switch and replace the bad names with better ones. We must always provide the exact branch that points to its upper shoresh root and elaborate on it until the accurate definition is provided for the scrutinizing reader. Indeed, those whose eyes have not been opened to the sights of heaven and have not acquired the proficiency in the connections of the branches of this world with their roots in the upper worlds are like the blind scraping the walls. They will not understand the true meaning of even a single word, for each word is a branch that relates to its shoresh root. Only if they receive an interpretation from a genuine sage who makes himself available to explain it in the spoken language, which is necessarily like translating from one language to another, meaning from the language of the branches to the spoken language, only then he will be able to explain the spiritual term as it is. This is what I have troubled to do in this interpretation, to explain the Sefirot 10 emanations as the godly sage the Ari had instructed us, in their spiritual purity, devoid of any tangible terms. Thus, any novice may approach the wisdom without failing in any materialization and mistake. With the understanding of these Sefirot 10 emanations, one will also come to examine and know how to comprehend the other issues in this wisdom.
Can I ask a question?
Feel free.
So, for example, we're using the branch of Paro, Pharaoh. It points to the way we perceive that word here is in a negative sense. But the meaning of that word changes in the different worlds. It has a negative meaning here in the world we live in, but if you're in the root world, you said that there it's actually something very pure or positive, or meaning what changes? I mean, the word stays the same, but something changes when you go from one world to another?
Exactly. It's like when we read the four phases of advancement, which is unformed, chaotic, darkness, and spirit. If you look at the Zohar portion and you read it on face value, which means the way someone before the burial would read it, you would read it as, oh, I would never want that to happen to me, since that looks like punishments. And the idea is that, no, it's not talking about punishments, it's talking about advancement, right? So the idea is that two people are reading the exact same Zohar portion. One is reading it and saying, well, this talks about something that I would never want to experience. And the other person is reading it as, oh, this is exactly what you need to experience.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, it's like spirituality and corporeality. It's like the words that we use in spirituality are different here in corporeality. Like what we have meanings for in spirituality, it's a difference between spirituality and corporeality, isn't it? Using these words, different words?
Yes. So the idea is that a corporeal word will be totally different in the spiritual sense.
Okay. So you can't, like, I have friends that study, let's say, the Torah, and they're of different religions, and they are taking it meaning word for word. When literally it really, and in what we're studying, it's not word for word as the external Torah. We're studying the internal. So how does like everybody understand it as one? They all have to study how we're studying?
So the idea is that if you want to use it as advancement, then you'll read it differently than if you're trying to look at it as corporeal laws that you have to keep in this world. I made one of the slides, and we can actually go over it now because it will just talk exactly about that. And some of you have seen this and some of you haven't. So here we've got an example where this is the first few sentences from the beginning of the Torah of Bereshit. Yes, Laura?
kind of getting back to what Yossi said, is it fair to say that, so Pharaoh, we see Pharaoh or identify with Pharaoh in this world, and then in the world of Absolute, the Pharaoh is the creator? That would be like the difference of the change of the name?
Yes, so the idea is that in this world we would see Pharaoh as an evil person who should we get rid of, and in Absolute we actually see it as a positive force that brings us forward, and that's why we say that Pharaoh brought the children of Israel closer to the Creator. So the Creator uses this force to actually bring people closer to him. Yes, Pharaoh is the backside of the Creator. Yes, Moshe.
So, am I capable of attaining the meaning before attaining the world? Meaning, like, before I get to Lam Atzilut, will I be able to understand or relate in any way to the meaning the word Pharaoh has there, in comparison to the meaning it has in the world where I am at right now?
Intellectually, yes. Emotionally, no. So you might intellectually able to know that information, but you won't feel it until you actually get to that world.
And just structure-wise, our roots are in the world of Atzilut. That's one layer up from where we are right now.
So the idea is that when we talk about reality, our reality is built from Tzimtzum Bet, which is the second restriction, and built from the world of Atzilut. So every branch in this world has a root in Olam Atzilut that cascades down to this world.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So we have here the first few sentences of the beginning of the Torah, of Bereshit. So we've got, in the beginning, the Creator created the heavens and the earth. Right? And most people think of it as, oh, the Creator made the physical heaven and the physical earth. And that's one way to read it. And the other way to read it is to read it, we are born into reality until we receive the point in the heart, which is what the first Creator references to, and learn about two forces inside us, bestowal, which is the heavens, and reception, which is the earth. And the earth was unformed and chaotic, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the spirit of the Creator. The will to receive goes through four phases: humanity, which is unformed; spiritual society, which is chaotic; group, which is darkness; and individual, which is spirit. And then we pass the barrier, first restriction, which is the second Creator. So from the first Creator until the second Creator is from when we get our point in the heart until we pass the barrier. And then soars over the surface of the waters and said, the Creator, let there be light. And we build inside us five faces of preordinal man called Galgalta, which is soars; Ab, which is over; Sag, the surface; Ma, of the waters; Bon, and said. And we then pass the process of second restriction, which is the third Creator. Right? So we got from the point in the heart, which is the first Creator, to the second Creator, which is passing the barrier, to the third Creator, which is passing the parsa. And then let there be light is because we get the light of Chokhmah after we pass the parsa. Right? And you can read about the unformed chaotic darkness spirit at the first commandment in the Zohar, and you can read about the soars over the surface of the waters and said in the rose of the Zohar.
And that part, that's where we're training to be an employee of the system. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yeah.
Now, is this document in the Dropbox yet?
This is in the system concepts slides that you were seeing.
Right, okay, yeah.
So this is just to give an example of how the way normally people read this and the way we're reading this is totally different, but the words are exactly the same. So we're not changing the words, we're changing the way the definitions, you could say, of them.
Because when they say that, those who have seen the heavens, like even us pre-barrier people have been made somewhat aware of this. So, we can attain a little bit, but not like we will after we cross the barrier.
Exactly.
That's what I was saying, though. This series of pages, so it's an incredible piece of reductionism. So you got something here.
And you can see that once you actually read it like this, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, why didn't we know this before, sort of thing.
I have a question.
Yes.
In the second sentence, how it flows, says the barrier, the first restriction. So the first goal is to become or receive the spirit of the Creator. Is that correct?
Exactly. The spirit is actually before, right? So the spirit is actually that phase 4, the individual phase, before the barrier. And then the Creator is when we actually pass the barrier.
Okay, and it's talking about the spirit of the Creator and passing the barrier, the first restriction. And we do that by expressing from our point in the heart, bestowal of contentment to the Creator and reception of His good. I'm trying to see how all this fits into crossing the barrier.
Which part are you trying to see how it sees to crossing the barrier?
Okay, we have in the beginning, the Creator created heavens and earth. The Creator point in the heart, heavens bestowal, and earth reception, which is, to me, is a illustration of how creation, or how we work within creation. And then it talks about unformed, chaotic, darkness. And then the next stage is the first passing the barrier, the first restriction, where what happens? I mean, okay, that's an unnecessary question. What I'm trying to say is what is the process to get to the door?
To pass the barrier?
Yeah.
So that's where we go through so in the phase beforehand, we go through these states of humanity, the spiritual society, right, the group, and the individual. And when we finish those individual phases, then we pass the barrier. These are the phases we go through. It's like steps, right? There's 16 steps, but it doesn't sound like that what you wanted to hear. So what were you referring to?
I'm not sure. So let's go on with the lesson, and maybe some light will be shed on it. My answer.
No problem. Anybody else want to ask about this? Yes, Yossi.
Yes. What I see here is 3 stages. The first one is the point in the heart, which is something very soft, something almost unfelt. And it reminds me of Bchina Aleph. How do you say Bchina?
Discernment.
Discernment, first discernment. And then something happens, and you cross the barrier, and you attain the quality of bestow, which reminds me of the second discernment. And then after you pass, and then you go through 4 stages, and you pass the parsa, where you actually learn how to use the power, the quality of bestow. Sort of like receive in order to bestow, and correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm missing here is the 4th stage. Where is Bchina Dalet in this story? Is there one?
The 4th discernment is the individual. Humanity is the first discernment, the first phase. Spiritual society is the second discernment, the second phase. The group is the third discernment, the third phase, and then in the individual is the 4th discernment, the 4th phase.
Right, but then you pass the barrier, right?
Yes.
Meaning, like, after passing the barrier, maybe I'm mistaken in thinking about it like that, but it seems to me you have completed Bchina Bet. Or maybe you started Bchina Bet, I'm not sure.
No, so you go through the first Bchina, the second Bchina, the third Bchina, the 4th Bchina, right? The 4th discernments, and then you pass the barrier. Now you're dealing with the 4 discernments all over again.
Okay, but I'm looking at something else, and maybe it's wrong. Meaning, like, the first creator that's mentioned here,
yes,
or you're calling it the point in the heart, this is the first Bchina. It's a question mark. And then the second creator...
It's unformed. So this whole thing where you find out about the creator of the heavens and the earth is when you're aware of the earth was unformed. That's why it's in past tense. and then you are in chaotic darkness and spirit.
Okay.
So it's not that you got. You could say that the point in the heart is revealed in 1.3 of unformed.
Does anybody else see here 3 stages? Like first stage, point in the heart, second stage, barriers, third stage, parsa, Bchina Aleph, Bet, Gimel, 3 different stages, and then does this talk to anybody?
Well, I think you said the unformed is the point in the heart. We get the point in the heart during that unformed time. And then we enter a spiritual society, which is the chaotic. So that's the second. And then the third, we enter phase 3, which is where we are now, because we want to clean concepts. And then after we clean concepts, we join with an individual to do more in-depth cleaning and more inner scrutinies. And then we pass the barrier. So this humanity spiritual group and individual, the very first point in the heart is during the humanity phase. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the middle of the humanity phase, you get your passive point in the heart. In the middle of the spiritual society, you get the active point in the heart. And in the middle of the group, you get the intense point in the heart.
Yossi, are you linking up? I believe, correct me if I'm incorrect, but I do kind of follow your thought, maybe, that he's linking up that there's 3 creators, which would be 3 discernments, but are there 4 discernments because there's 4 phases? Is that what you're trying to ask, Yossi?
Yes.
So the idea is that there is a 4th creator, but that's after this 3rd creator. So there is
Okay.
4 phases, but that would be the creator after the let there be light. And this was just referring to the first 3. But the idea is you've always got these 4 phases with their hidden root, hidden everywhere.
What's the 4th creator?
Wouldn't that be final correction?
Yeah, the third. No, the 3rd one would be Atzilut. Sorry, the 4th one would be Atzilut, and then you'd have the 5th one, which would probably be end of correction. But I haven't looked at that. I haven't delved into that. I just brought this one. You basically have the preparation, which is all this. Then you have the unformed, which is into here. And then you have got the chaos, which is from the 2nd creator to the 4th creator, I'm guessing. But I haven't looked into it deep. You can definitely see how this aligns up.
Zach, I have a question and a comment regarding what they were asking right now. The picture that I see, if I compare this slide to the slide where you had the 4 phases, to be part of the phase 1, which was the humanity, no discernment had to be made to be in the humanity. Everybody is in this humanity. But to go from that phase 1 to the phase 2, that's that beginning point in the heart. That's the beginning. Let's say I would consider it like a bridge, because to have that cross the first bridge, you were in one place already to start with, which is the humanity level. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but the question that I had right now in looking at this is the path. What you are describing and how you're coding it in color, it's not a process of from above downward. Now let's go from downward through this up. It's actually you're detailing it not as look what happened. Now let's go back up there. You're basically saying no, nothing has happened. We're looking at this from above downward. Is that correct?
That is true. That is, we're not looking at the past, instead to go in the future. The reality cascaded from top to bottom, but our perception is still at that top, and we need to bring it down to the bottom to have alignment between reality, which is at this world, and align our perception to be able to attain this world. So the things we think we're attaining in this world, we're not. We're born into a situation where we're not attaining this world at all. We have very little discernment. And that's why we don't understand why there's wars and why there's all different things and why people are angry and bad and stuff like that. We just have no awareness of that. And when we actually attain and go through the development, that the way that reality went through the development, then in the end we reach, at the end of correction, we reach this world. And then we're actually able to interact with this world the way it was intended to be.
And for me, the incremental method's working because our perception grows a little bit by a little bit by a little bit. It would probably be too shocking. Like you say, if you went from phase 1.3 up to like 4.3, you'd be in a state of shock, due to the degree of the difference of the perceptions and discernments we're getting. So I think it's working out well, all incremental, step by step.
Think of it like the eyes of a baby. When the baby is born into the world, right, the reality is the same in the entire growth of the baby's eyes. So he looks around and he sees everything very vague and not understanding where he is. And slowly his eyesight starts to mature. And then he's able to see the reality the way that adults are able to see it. So it's not that reality is changing, his perception is changing. So at the beginning we go through our physical growth to align to reality, and now we have to go through our spiritual growth, our perception growth to align to reality as well.
Don't you think that reality was created by humanity? Like we were once close to the Creator. It was very a thin veil. We spoke to the Creator, He spoke back, whatever, and now we're moving so far away.
We're maturing. It's like, it depends on which direction you're looking for. If you look at a baby and your perspective point is the womb, then as the baby grows, it's getting further and further away from the womb. And if the womb is your positive point, then as the further you're going away from it, you would see that as bad. It's like some parents can't let the children leave home. They see that as a bad thing. They're like, no, you're meant to stay with mommy, you're meant to stay with daddy forever. Right? And as the kid grows, he gets into the adolescence and wants to leave. He wants to lead his own life. And we see that like, oh no, he's leaving. Why? He should stay with mommy and daddy. We know what's best for him. And why is he wanting to leave and make his own life? Right? And the same thing goes with humanity. One of the reasons that it says that Avram was worried why he wouldn't get anything is because he was like, I only have the root coarseness. How am I ever going to get what you promised me if I've got such a small coarseness level? And then the Creator answers to him, oh, don't worry, I'll take you through Egypt where you'll get through higher, coarser levels. Right? So the idea is that we actually want this coarseness to be able to handle reality. And we don't want to go to a point where we just have the most purity of, no coarseness at all. That's what we call a baby. That's what we call someone who's unformed. We call someone who has no awareness where they are. And you actually need that coarseness to match up with the coarseness of reality. So one of the reasons why we have to learn Kabbalah with a group and with a teacher and a guide and the books and all this thing is because we're born into the most total opposite way of thinking. We're born into a way of thinking where we think the end should be purity, where I should see the whole world as one. And it's like, no, you'll see the whole world still as separate. If someone's at end of correction and they join this Zoom, they're still able to see all you members and they won't be like, oh, I can't see any of you because I'm at end of correction. So the idea is not only can he see you, he can actually interact with you more and actually understand you more because he's got those more discernments that he's collected. So the idea is not to reach a point where we don't see anything. And that's normally the way we imagine purity, but rather to reach a point where we can see everything and actually attain the world we're actually living in. And that's what Kabbalah is all about. And that's the problem with all these pseudo-spiritual ideas, that they tend to take us into thinking, oh, the world will be a point where there'll be no wars and we'll all just be dead. And it's like, no, it doesn't say that. It says, well, we'll all be pure. Yeah, we won't be doing anything. That's what the way that we normally think of purity, as a place that we won't be doing anything. And we won't be having any innovation and any kind of growth whatsoever. We'll reach a point where we'll all just be doing nothing and being dead and just being content with what we have. We'll just be breathing. Isn't that lovely? It's like, no, the idea is to actually live our lives with depth and discernments and decisions and concepts and ideas and innovation and growth. And that is what end of correction is all about.
Yeah, so we could have bought into something that's not even going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, oh, at the end, it'll be at peace and everything. And we're walking around like buying into it as humanity. when it's really the other way around.
Exactly, and that is why we say that, it's so funny, we repeat and regurgitate so many quotes and we don't even think of them with any depth. It says, for example, that the world of Kabbalah is upside down. It's like, yeah, it's upside down, and we think, oh, it's upside down, but, we'll reach peace on earth. Oh, you mean you want to reach peace on earth the same way that you thought in phase one? Or is it going to change as you go through the phases, and you'll find out it's going to be the total opposite? And that is why it's so hard for us to talk to phase one people, because it's the opposite. If it was just about peace on earth, we could talk to phase one people and say, well, reach peace on earth, help me reach peace on earth. And it would be like, fine, great. The problem is that what peace on earth that someone before the barrier thinks and what peace on earth someone in phase one thinks are the total opposite. And that is why we constantly need the group and the environment to basically clothe us with so many concepts, just constantly keep us realigned, because our default situation is to constantly revert to just our imagination of peace on earth as a place where no one moves.
Zach, I had a question about this. You're saying that if a person wants peace, really what they have to be is really cleaning out closets and like really getting things and dragging them out into the light, because you won't reach peace without, conflict and resolution and building and rebuilding and so on and so forth. Am I correct in this?
Exactly. The idea is that when you have two nations, you don't reach peace by none of them doing anything, but rather you reach peace by them both fighting with each other and finding a middle ground where both of their work can be unified. And that's what we've seen. If you look throughout history, when there's been wars, what that's done is actually called a unification of different cultures together. So if each country was totally separate, we wouldn't have the internet today. Like, we have internet today because of all the tribulations and wars and the posterior of connection is always a war, is always conflict. And we're just so used to, we just want to think, it's really like that movie Inside Out of Disney, Pixar, where at the beginning, you're shown joy and sadness, and we think sadness, just kick her out of the room, she's causing all the problems. But at the end of the movie, we find out that all the moments of joy were preceded by a moment of sadness. So sadness is actually the enabler for joy.
So you have to go through the eye of the storm, basically, if you want to get to the other side of everything's lovely and dandy and we're all connected and happy. You're going to have to punch each other in the face a little bit, hopefully constructively.
Internally.
Well, internally, right. Of course, not. Thank God we have computers and we're not physically, I'm just kidding.
It's the internal war that you wage inside yourself. So there's no peace within yourself, and you wage that war within yourself to get to a peace, to get to that wholeness.
Think of it like this way. We're actually born into the world where we don't love ourselves. An end of correction is where you love yourself, your true self.
That makes sense a lot.
And along the way, we constantly expose our hatreds towards ourselves. And it manifests many times in other people. But at the end of the day, we're hating ourselves. So it doesn't mean that you can't see bad behavior in other people. It is you'll have acceptance of it and know how to deal with it accordingly. So it doesn't mean that you won't send someone to jail, but it means you won't have to hate him in order to send him to jail. And these concepts can't be evade us, and we constantly need to rehear them because we're just bombarded of all these positive messages out there, and the problem is those positive messages don't actually get us anywhere because they're in the total opposite direction. They're trying to bring us back to where we were, which is the past, which is impossible, instead of taking us to the future, which is possible.
But will we ever do it as humanity?
Will we ever what?
Will we ever, in the place where we get to after the barrier, we never were there in humanity, ever?
Humanity never was at the barrier. They were never past it. They were never in the situation that we're going through now, especially on the courses levels that we're going through now.
Can anybody hear me?
Yep.
There was silence for a little bit, or did I just lose connection?
Either people fell asleep or they're in awe.
Okay. I thought maybe I lost my bandwidth is really bad.
Well, I thought we were going to the next slide, aren't we?
You want to go to the next slide? We can go on the next slide. So we finished the Talmud Sefirot, but this is the system concepts one.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, we finished the Talmud Sefirot, yeah.
Oh, I thought you had more slides.
Yeah, the idea was just to go over the preparation, just go over this idea of, I knew it would take some time because I wanted actually people to focus on this idea of the difference between the root and the branches, and how the way that we're normally reading Kabbalah is just totally different the way a Kabbalist reads the same material. So you'll have two people reading the same words, and you'll have two people understanding totally different terms.
You talked to us about that, because you said when you read, your brain is divided in two. You're actually getting your attainment side understanding while you're still getting the literal understanding.
Exactly, and that's one of the ways you know that you have an attainment, because you're getting those multiple definitions in your head at the same time.
That's got to be crazy. I tell you, that's got to be wild.
But that's why you need the maturity. That's what the maturity is needed for, to be able to handle that. It's just like when we tell our children things, we know how they're going to understand it, but we have a totally different understanding. And that's why if you look at, children movies, they always have hidden adult jokes in them, because they word them in the way that the children won't understand, but the adults get it. So the adults get to see an adult movie, the children get to see a children movie, and everyone's happy. So they slip in all different, adult jokes in the movies, and that way the adult is not bored by just seeing a children's movie. He actually gets to have points of chuckle and enjoyment.
Zachary, so I'm asking myself, when you're talking about the Kabbalah books, I mean, this paragraph we just read, do you consider it also part of the Kabbalah books? And if so, somebody who's a Mekubal would be reading the same paragraph and would be getting a total different sense and perception of it?
Exactly. First of all, the Torah is part of the Kabbalistic writings. And the idea that they wrote it all in a way that they didn't give any prefix saying, oh, by the way, this is not talking about corporeality. Rather, they actually knew that everyone would understand it their way and actually enforced it and made it into the code of law to say, yeah, this is exactly what it's talking about. Of course, it's talking about corporeality. And then they say, yeah, and by the way, there are secrets in it. And everyone's like, yeah, there's secrets, but of course it's talking about corporeality. And the way we serve the Creator is by doing corporeal actions. And that's the way, they say that, God wanted a house in the lower, and that's what we should do. It's all about the actions we do in this world. And they're like, yeah, of course it also talks about secrets, but no one's really interested in them. They just like to say that there's something higher, something deeper in it, without actually reaching that depth, and without understanding that the depth is actually the more important part.
It's like a sham.
It's a conspiracy.
No, I get that, but it's like amazing.
But I mean, you can also look at it from a really, positive perspective. If people weren't out there doing all these corporeal things and building churches and cathedrals and synagogues, I mean, where would we be? A society on a corporeal level would not move anywhere either. You know what I mean? Who would build hospitals, or who would build synagogues? Stuff like that.
Yeah, but the idea is we've reached now a maturity where we don't need the Bible to tell us to build a hospital. We can do it for scientific reasons.
That's true, but 8 billion people, they got to be led only this way. They have to fear Creator, and if they don't do this, and if they don't give charity or whatever, he's going to come down and slap you. And
that's why we're going through maturity, right? It's like with the children. But Rabash has a great letter, and maybe I should even show it, where he just talks about that. I'll bring it up. Where he talks about the idea of, don't be afraid of the bear and the lion. But that's what they basically tell people, that there's a bear and a lion. And he says, you don't need to go through that anymore. What are you, a child?
Yeah, so they create the story, and we get inherited into the story, and our children's children and children's children, everybody has this big creation of a made-up story. So it has to stop somewhere, and it's our responsibility.
Exactly, and here it is. So who wants to read from and regarding the third question? There you go. Somebody go for it.
And regarding the third question about keeping the party with great exaggeration, it is so because this is how people behave when they are afraid that the baby will leave the house alone at night. They tell him, "There is a bear outside, and other wild beast." Since the baby cannot understand any other way, in other words, if he were to know the truth that there is no lion or bear outside, but it is best for the baby to go to sleep, and most importantly, to remain indoors, the baby wouldn't be able to accept the truth. Therefore, you should know, my brother, that to accept the path of truth and the words of truth of Bala HaSalam, there aren't many people who can hear the words of truth. For you are only seeing many kids, and what can I tell you? Well, you are in kindergarten, and you are impressed by them, writing to me that they are cheerful and gay. Indeed, so is the way of babies, to be cheerful and gay. But it is known that a baby is not taken seriously when crying or when happy, because its excitement and feelings are about unimportant matters. And when you see that the baby is crying during service, you are impressed. And when he is glad and dances, you are impressed. And you write that you envy the children for being cheerful and dancing. And what do you want? To be a baby all over again? You should know, my brother, that your childhood days are over. You walked into Bala HaSalam's room, you were dancing just as they were. And may the Creator assist us in the corporeality and in the spirituality. Your friend, Barak Salam, Levi Ashlag, son of Bala HaSalam.
And this is from letter number 24.
I love this one, man. This is fantastic. I have to bookmark this one.
So you can just see I think it's self-explanatory.
That we need that idea of magic or fantasy.
Exactly. But at a certain point, you should want to reach maturity and outgrow Santa Claus and understand that your father's actually dropping the presents through the chimney.
So what is it seems ridiculous, the purpose to reinforce, to cause behavior instilled by fear and corporeality. And then I know in Baal Salam it says there is no lion and the door is unlocked. So why do we so negatively reinforce behavior instead of looking at the positive, this is what you will gain, this is what will happen, rather than creating this fear in someone, even a child? It's ridiculous.
Well, number one is because they don't have
I didn't see it that it was creating a fear. It was saying, oh, sorry, Zakai, go ahead.
No, go for it, Laura.
I saw it as it saying that the child wouldn't believe it, that it needs that fantasy in order to stay inside. And I take that as we, even adults, not just the child, we like that fantasy of it's this magical water, it's this magic, instead of stripping all that away and taking the truth. And that's a metaphor. That story of the child and the bear is a metaphor for that. That's how I saw it.
I agree with you, Laura. Like, one of the ways that the barrier, for example, is portrayed is as something very positive and very like, oh, you pass the barrier, you'll feel amazing. And then people pass the barrier and they're like, wait a second, it wasn't as, where did I didn't get any superpowers, where is all this greatness? I actually feel emptiness after the barrier. It's like, well, yeah, you actually feel emptiness. But for people that don't actually want to reach it, then it's the best thing is to draw them this perfection of the barriers, the all, end all and greatness. But if someone actually wants to go through things scientifically, they have to know that, oh, when they pass the barrier, they're going to feel that emptiness. And that's one of the ways to actually know the difference between people which are serious about the path and people which not. You've got many people who say, oh, I passed the barrier. It's like, how did it feel when you passed? Amazing. So it's like, so you didn't pass any barrier. It's like, what do you mean? Of course, it was amazing. It's like, no, you don't feel amazing when you pass the barrier. You actually feel emptiness. You feel disoriented because it's a totally new phase that you've never been in before. So the idea is that people want to believe in this magic. They want to believe in this nonsense, and it gives them hope to stay where they are. So the idea is for those who actually want to advance, they can find the information. And for those who don't want to advance, they can stay in all their corporeal magic.
No voodoo.
Exactly. The idea is not to erase what happened before, to understand that it has its purpose, but the idea is that you as an individual can outgrow that purpose and reach a higher purpose. So it's not that we have to run around to the world and say everybody, it's a lie, the Creator's not outside of you. If you don't keep Shabbos, you won't get smitten by heaven. The idea is not to run around doing that to people. Rather, for the people that are ready for it, they'll come and they'll hear this information and they'll want to actually advance and pass the barrier. And those who won't will continue with their kumbaya connection and just enjoy their lives that way. And it's okay. For someone who wants to advance, let them advance. Just because you've become an adult, it doesn't mean you go to children and start kicking their toys and saying, you useless piece of children that are playing with plastic toys, you should be dealing with real toys. Let the kids play with their toys and let you go get a Ferrari.
You said, did I hear you say we're done with TES? Because I thought this inner reflection we did today was just the introduction to the other inner reflection articles.
What we went over is the introduction inside the inner reflection of part 1. And then next week we'll go over chapter 1 itself. I wanted to do it separate because chapter 1 is very full of stuff, and I didn't want to take away from this concept that we just, as you can see, went over of the idea between the root and the branches. Laura, did you want to ask something? Hand is up.
No, that was from before. Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't take it down.
No problem.
So I understand the concept of the language of roots and branches, and I'm asking myself,
You're on mute.
anybody out there?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Did you hear my question?
No.
I said that I understand the concept of roots and branches, the language. But what I'm asking myself now is, what can I do with that today before attaining higher degrees or worlds in which the meanings of the same words would be attained? What do I do with it today other than keeping it in the back of my mind as a type of information?
Well, first of all, it gives you a place to check yourself with, right? So the more and more you're able to read it differently, then you know the more and more you've advanced, number one. Number two, to know that the depth is not going to be by some secret book suddenly landing on your lap. Like, oh, I found the secret book, unlocked under the caves of wonders. Like, no, it's the book that everybody has in their house and no one knows how to read it. So the secrets, when we went over the 3 rules of unnecessary, impossible, and secrets, those are how you read the wisdom that we've all been reading for years. We've been reading Kabbalah for years, and we never understood that we should be reading it not as reality but as perception. We shouldn't be reading it as the past but as the future. And we shouldn't be reading it about others as some creature that went through different phases, but rather we should be reading about ourselves. It's talking about the states we go through. So it's not that 2 people will be reading Talmud Sefirot and have a totally different view. So most people read Talmud Sefirot as a great set of volumes of talking about how the Creator made the will to receive cascade from the top to this world, and we'll be reading it as how we go from the top to this world, how we actually go from the state where we're in this world and we can't attain anything, to reaching a state where we can attain everything in this world.
I'm still hung up on this fear thing. To me, it seems very left line. And I think, we shortchange the system, or we short circuit the system, because even in humanity, okay, we say, what do you talk? Oh, beware when you go out the door, because people will take advantage of you and so forth. But yet there's beautiful people who altruistic, they build hospitals, they build orphanages, they build homeless shelters, addiction centers. So to say that humanity in itself is bad, and the only way to survive in the world is through fear. Fear is reinforced. Oh, you better get your diploma or you'll never amount to anything, instead of something encouraging like, that somehow this education is going to benefit you and help you grow and lead you to the next thing. I mean, I just feel like there's two sides of every coin, and I am not a fear mongerer. It's like saying that all people who practice Islam are terrorists and evil. Well, people believe that, but what do you hear in the media every day? Oh, they're terrorists. We can't let them in the country, and da-da-da-da-da. And even when I walk my dogs, I meet people who are Muslim, and I don't see any bombs. I see them going in the dentist office like the rest of the world.
It's much easier to deal with people through fear than through love. Because love requires discernment and fear doesn't. So with fear, I can say to you, be careful. And you'll be like, be careful of what? And you're already scared even though I haven't told you of what. With love, it requires so many discernments. It's just so much easier to manipulate an entire group of people through fear than through love. With love, it requires that very individual work with each person to work on how they need to deal with their life accordingly. That requires so much more energy than to manipulate people through fear. Fear is a much easier way to manipulate people. It's so much easier to say to people, oh, if you don't come to the lesson, you'll lose your spirituality. Then try to actually convince each person what they'll actually get out of it and why they should actually come to learn in each lesson. It's so much easier to use fear as a tactic than to use love as a tactic. Because love is individual and fear is global.
But on the other side of that, the person who's able to be manipulated by fear, it's their responsibility to also want to find the truth and break through all of that. So when you want to stay where you are and not take the responsibility to break through, then that's where you stay. That's how you become manipulated by that.
Exactly. The idea is that a person can choose whether he wants to be manipulated by fear or manipulated by love. And those which are manipulated by fear, it's because that's what they want. They don't want to learn all the discernments and all the differences. It's so much easier. It's not just that the media is giving it to us. We want to receive it. We want the media to educate us by fear. At the end of the day, the media is designed to have a customer. And if there's customers, then they will give what they want. And it's so much easier to broadcast fear than broadcast love, because you can't broadcast love. It requires so much discernment and individual work with someone to actually give them love. It's so much easier to fear a whole people than actually love them. Because for love, you actually have to have the discernment and make differences between terrorists and non-terrorists. With fear, you don't have to make any distinctions. So an idiot can have fear, and it requires an educated person, someone who can actually think and decide to actually reach love.
Even now, in the U.S., we have the presidential debates and all that. And when you watch it, they're all scaring us. I could do this for you. I will stop that. And I'll stop these hate mongers from coming in. And it's like it keeps going and going and going. And it is fearful that they just keep creating fear. And that's what, you're right, our world's based on fear. Like Davina said, Renee said that, it's fear, but there's also beautiful people in the world, and we have to make our discernments.
Look, even if you look at BB dissemination, you will notice that most fear is actually based on fear. Like BB doesn't they don't spend time to convincing you why you should pass the barrier. Rather, they say to you, oh, if you don't do this, a world war will happen. If you don't learn all day, then the world will be destroyed. That is, even in BB, they use the fear factor because it works much better than using a love factor. The thing is that when you actually evolve and grow, then you don't care about it. It doesn't speak to you anymore. You're like, okay, so the world might destroy. So why can't I understand this concept in Talmud Sefirot? That's what bothers me in life. And not, if the world will go to hell, so fine, it'll go to hell. I'll be dead and it'll be okay. What I need to worry about is why can't I advance in spirituality? Yes, Moshe.
Well, I was just gonna say, in marketing, fear is like the best the best thing to do. To manipulate people. You have conversions 4 to 5 times better using fear than positive marketing statements. So, it's I don't blame anybody for using it, but it's a great tool.
I think it's a great tool only if you're easily intimidated. I myself, my initial response, even from the earliest time I could remember, if someone tried to scream to me, that was a challenge. And I always pushed back. And I think it also goes to the discussion we had a few days ago about how money, honor, food, and sex are more important than human life. People will use that fear to attain those things, that honor.
You'll find many people. Sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say, fear can be used correctly as well. If you see everyone around you is seemingly doing things that you aren't doing, you should have some fear and say, well, why isn't it that I can't have what they do? It's both-sided. I guess it's all about the way you use it.
Isn't that envy, wanting, something that someone has? I don't know. Maybe
fear of being left behind, like you envy them, but you're
okay.
I'll be left behind because I'm envious of them and they're doing it and I'm not.
Okay, I got it.
I would say like this: if more and more people cross the barrier, then it wouldn't be useful anymore to use fear as a tactic. It doesn't register. When you pass the barrier, it doesn't work the way it works in normal people. So the more and more people that will cross from fear basically into love, then fear will no longer be a tactic used in the media. And that is the correction that we need, not by saying to people, oh, don't put labels on each other. The labels are needed there for many reasons. We just don't know how to use those labels accordingly. And that's why no one's solution will be to label even more and to discern even more. Everyone's solution will always be, oh, we need to reduce the labels. We need to reduce the differences between people. And that's going back to wanting to return to that root where there were no differences and there was no heavens and earth and there was no land and sky. You need all these differences. And actually, if you add more differences, then you can actually move forward and actually know how to deal with all these differences accordingly. Yes, Moshe.
Oh, my hand was still up. Let me take it down.
All right, I think we'll end here and enter the after party.